What we want to talk about and really share with you guys today is the experience we've had from virtual production to the metaverse. And specifically was a case study we worked with Warner Brothers on with the CGI character Steppenwolf. This is a workshop rather than like a full-on, hey, this is what we did. So we're going to deep dive under the hood a little bit. I hope you guys don't mind. And please interrupt along the way. If there's something we say and you think, hey, how did that work? Then ask. My name is Gadney. I'm the CEO of Charisma. We'll put this contact details up afterwards, so you can always get in touch. And with me is Salili-James here, who's our CTO, who is responsible for the Charisma.ai tech, which is sort of AI-driven storytelling, which we'll cover a little bit. So what we do is we power charismatic digital humans. Digital humans, as you know, basically could be anything human, could be anything done by Epic Games, MetaHumans, who we work really closely with, or could be a more sort of low-fidelity metaverse type character in sort of cartoon world. They look at the moment a little bit like this. And where the industry is at the moment is they look stunning. So the sort of the focus of attention for so much of the industry is on what they look like. You're getting beautiful, almost, although they don't like to say it, photorealistic characters. Believable is the word that we all try and stick with. So we've got absolutely stunning metahumans from Epic, and then companies like Ready Player Me doing more of the cartoonized thing. They look great, but they don't do anything. They don't perform. They don't emote. They don't feel like we feel. And the problem we're solving is that games and metaverses need these rich interactive characters to make us empathize with them. If we want to bump into them in a metaverse or in a game and have that conversation, it's got to be good. So that's where we come in. In terms of virtual production, what we're talking about today. So from our perspective, I'd say the state of the art at the moment is probably The Mandalorian. Stand to be corrected on this, but certainly during lockdown, during the pandemic, it was that program that changed the industry, because suddenly they had to make the show, and they realized that they could solve a lot of the problems with partners such as Unreal, NVIDIA, and obviously through ILMX Lab. I was just talking to our esteemed cameraman just before this earlier about how revolutionary it is. And I'll show you a little video of what that looked like from a SIGGRAPH talk of them presenting it. But if you are directing a movie via a heads-up display, like a VR thing, already there's something strange going on, because you're not looking in the same way a movie director looks. You're seeing something totally different. You are seeing real-time points of view. So you're changing the camera angle, not only on a level plane, sort of as we have with gravity, where it might be wandering around the room, but you're zooming up 30 meters, down 30 meters, you're twisting and turning in ways that normally you cannot. You have full control of the cast, which will show you, and the speed to the final edit is almost done in real time. So you're directing the final edit rather than doing the shots and then going back into the edit room. So I'll show you a short piece, which was a presentation on this that you might find interesting. So we have the director here. This is a SIGGRAPH presentation which was done, and you will see by two guys. They're on stage as they're giving this presentation, so that's the first thing you need to know. They're on stage wearing VR headsets, and what you see here is the end result of what they're directing.
So Gavin, this trooper turns around and notices Phasma. This time around, let's try a bigger reaction than last time.
Okay, bigger.
Grayson, let's play back the old performance.
I heard Kylo Ren destroyed the one over in D sector.
If you ask me, who's ever in charge of this place should be transferred to Hawk. What? Okay, got it.
Got it. Cool. Let's rewind. We'll hide the old performance.
Okay.
And let's give a mark for Gavin to start on. Cool. Let's get Gavin into costume, please.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Look at that.
And I'm going to set up a camera here. So we're a bit wide on this. Let's go closer to 75.
Hey, going to 75?
Cool. And we'll pull focus during the shot from the trooper to Phasma. So let's open the elevator doors.
Okay, you got it.
And pull deep. Great. So we have those two focus points. Let's rewind. And roll camera.
Rolling?
If you ask me, who's ever in charge of this place should be transferred to Hawk.
And so we pause it there. And the reason we pause it there is that now you get the reveal of these guys who are so one is directing, the other one is the actor. So when he said, let's get the guy into costume, that was like an instant stormtrooper, with makeup, sort of straight away, which I love. The language that was used in that is just insane if you sort of break it down. They're using standard film development sort of language, but the results you see on screen are completely new and completely different. So I think that's, that for us is where the state of the art is. This project we want to take you through was a result of a UK-funded XR challenge around the future of storytelling. And it was organized by this one of the creative clusters in the UK called XR Stories in collaboration with Warner Brothers Innovation. And the case study was on Steppenwolf. And part of oh God, that's made me thirsty. Just that's like a Diet Coke ad straight away there. Please don't do that again, because I'm going to have to go and get myself one. The case study we have here is Steppenwolf, and what we were trying to interrogate as a hypothesis was to say, how do you get something which is a CGI model, which was in this case developed for the movie by Weta Digital. It's a multi-million-dollar rig. His axe is 2 gig of data, let alone the model itself. How do we turn that now into something which is sort of fit for the metaverse? And from our perspective, from a charisma perspective, what that means is that players can talk to him. It's no longer you go into a movie house and you're watching this performance, but now you're at home and he looks straight out, as you can see here, out through breaking the fourth wall straight at you, and you're engaging with him. You are a key character in the story. So again, you're not playing a character in Justice League. You're not playing Batman or whoever it may be. Steppenwolf is talking to you as an individual. And this, while it's sort of easy to say, conceptually for writers and for the production process, is really hard. Because if you imagine a writer of a novel, they're writing a monologue, and they know it's going to be hard set in paper and print. But in our world, there's a lot more fluidity around that story. The goal was to engage deeper. In other words, I have a connection with Steppenwolf. I'm not just watching Steppenwolf, but I'm actually almost having a relationship with them. And that, from Warner Brothers' perspective, is getting them closer to the characters, which they love. So I'll take you through. I'll show you the beginnings of what we produced. And you'll see it's me interacting a little bit with Steppenwolf. I'll run it for a minute or so, and then we'll go under the hood and I'll show you the production process.
I am Steppenwolf. And you look scared. Are you scared, human?
You don't scare me, Steppenwolf.
Bravado in the face of threat. It is courageous, but with you it's fake. You already know who I am. I have broken 100,000 worlds in Darkseid's name, and soon I will break the Earth. But there is something in my way. I am looking for a suitable human to infiltrate our enemies from the inside.
Okay.
Okay. Is that all you can think of? Now, tell me. Does having a purpose appeal to you?
Do I want a purpose? Yeah, I guess so.
A human with actual ambition. You outclass most of your kind. Do you have a name, Primitive?
My name is Stephen.
Who gave you such a feeble name, Stephen?
My parents gave me that name when I was born.
One of humanity's great flaws is reliance on blood relations. Your family is your weakness.
Hey, my parents are brilliant.
Is there anyone you care for, Stephen?
That would probably be my parents, actually.
So, you are not alone. That is a relief. It means you can blend in with the majority of humankind, which is what I need. Would you give your own life for your parents?
Yes, I reckon so.
Are you sure about that? Who's in a better position to do good in this world? Why would they deserve to live more than you? I ask you again, would you really give your life for theirs?
Okay, no, actually.
I knew it. You falter in the face of threat. Self-preservation at all costs. You truly are a stinking vermin, Stephen.
So I changed my name to Stephen. I changed my name to Stephen there for, because I didn't like being insulted personally by Steppenwolf. So, again, let's just sort of rewind, and I'll tell you what we saw there. Everything you saw there was being generated in real time. So this is not a pre-rendered model. When he is lifting his axe, that is being triggered by charisma, by the engine, which is written or was choreographed by the writer. And that's an important sort of addition to the writer's skills. They're not just writing the dialogue that he says, they're also choreographing it. And that choreography is then triggered, in real time. The voice of Steppenwolf, that's an AI voice. So we partner with a number of different partners that Ben will talk through. That one was from Replica Studios. And it is now a sort of creative art on how to direct those AI voices. This is not Siri. This is not Alexa. This is Steppenwolf. And so Steppenwolf has to get angry. And Steppenwolf has to emote. And from my perspective, I set a notional bar of that sort of performance that I'm waiting for. And we're, by the way, weeks away from this. Is that scene in A Few Good Men with Jack Nicholson. And, truth, you can't handle the truth. But if you remember his dialogue around that, it's quite monotonous. He's staying calm. He's staying very controlled. It's within that framework, which we can do. And then suddenly explodes. When we can do that through AI voices, then we will be able to properly perform. And these characters will come to life. So this is what we wanted to do. We wanted to test the pipeline into an immersive story, produce our real-time story, have the range of character depths and emotions, and have multiple commercial options. What that means is that this Steppenwolf could be on your mobile phone, could be on the web, could be as part of a theme park that you meet, could be in a retail outlet. Those are what we mean by those commercial options. And this is what that story looked like. So this is the charisma graph of Steppenwolf there. Here we start off with the dialogue, which is you look scared. You can't see that in the detail here. Now, what you will notice, and a word for the writers here, is that this one is written largely left to right, which is quite handy when I'm doing a sort of landscape keynote. Some of our other writers, who may be more technical and non-linear, are thinking their stories don't look like this. Theirs are like a sort of hub and spoke of a caravan wheel. They'll start the story in the center, and then they'll spear out on a sort of logic which charisma enables. Looking at this briefly, what you've got the green nodes here, which is the dialogue that charisma says, that Steppenwolf says, and then this blue column is the magic and the brain of charisma, which Ben will talk about a bit more. This is the natural language processing piece that we've developed with AI to understand what you as the player are saying, and then provide a contextual response. So really what charisma is that it's an interactive story writing tool. Yeah, that's easy. But it's also layering and interweaving gameplay. And we're strongly inspired by video games industry about, how to do gates, how to do, success and failure. It's interesting to weave success and failure into a story. You don't often fail at reading a book, but you could fail talking to Steppenwolf. So behind the scenes, this is where we started. So we started off with a model here. This is the base model. And then we knew that the first thing that we were going to have to get to grips with was his face and the facial animations. This is state of the art. And if we look here, we're doing a number of screen tests as we take that rig, which was enormous, and then downsize it from the Unreal Engine. Had tip for anyone doing virtual production, please, when you're doing these huge multi-million-dollar things, also take into account we might want to downsize it. It would save us weeks of sort of re-rigging these, and it's important as we make this virtual production into the metaverse ready that we're considering that. Then we bring him to life. We have a series of different loops. There's the axe pointing piece. And again, what these are doing is that these effectively are his performance movements. So we said we want the axe, and there will be moments during that where he's going to emote his anger by pointing the axe sort of at you through the screen. So we have that as a loop, and that loop is one of the sort of pieces of the color palette that the writer can use. We partnered with the Canadian company Jali. David is in the audience here. With whom, over this project, we sort of totally bonded. We found that, again, like I was saying at the beginning, what we do is the performance, the underlying behavior of these digital humans. What Jali's doing is their AI is driving the facial animation based on the script that the writer's writing. So you don't need to animate it. You just need to type it, and then the animation comes out, which is pretty cool. And by the way, non-trivial. This is, I was talking to David earlier, and we were just talking about the industry and how sometimes we talk to people and people go, oh, but Google hasn't even done that. So you can't be doing it. It's like, no, I know Google hasn't done it. Yes, we have. Just because Google hasn't done it doesn't mean it's not possible. So, go the little guys a little bit. So,
And you look scared. Are you scared?
These were the first tests we see. So there's what we provide to Jali is the audio export. So the writer writes the text dialogue, we create that audio that you heard, we send that over to Jali, and then that is matched using a series of phonetics and magic and words like that into that. Now this is probably the most boring slide, but also the most important, because somewhere in between the art of telling a story and the art and the technology of automating it, there needs to be a filter that says, don't just automate it on purpose. Think about what you're wanting to automate. So here we have sort of the middle filter that we look at when we're telling our stories, which might be, for example, when I'm saying about he's got to do emotions. What are the emotions? If you choose to do it from a research perspective, look up the theory of emotions in Hollywood, and it's an entire set of different religions around whether you use the word angry, whether you use the word sad, whatever they may be. So there's a whole piece that we have to align ourselves with. And then we create our character text. So this is how a writer would write it. This is a standard character node. We can set our emotions manager. And this means that when he says Steppenwolf, that a particular emotion will be triggered, like he's happy or the relationship goes. And we have a number of different pieces of functionality that the author can use on these character nodes to trigger various different pieces of performance. Then, as I was saying, we then create the player node. This is the sort of clever AI piece where, as a writer, we're now listening to what the player's saying. And if the player says something is broadly positive, like thumbs up, or broadly negative, like thumbs down, then we're recognizing that, and then the story will go down that particular pathway. If the writers put thumbs up, it'll go down, okay, the player said something good. Now, but it's not just about matching a word. That's basic. This is machine learning magic. Call it from Ben, which you can talk about how the magic works. So, for example, if I type in a sentence, if I anticipate that the player might say, "I like Italy, I like France, I like Spain," yeah, if the player does say one of these, then we'll pick it up. If the player also says, "I like Germany," then it'll pick it up also, because what's sitting behind here is pattern matching, and Charisma has recognized these are European countries. And so if someone says that, we can pick it up as a pattern match and say that we recognize that they're there. Or they stay at any state in the US, we can recognize as a state in the US. So you're now locating people in the right areas. Or we can just take an exact match and do that. And then this is the graph as it plays out. Okay. So inside the brain, for this, because I do the sort of the non-brain bit, Ben does the brain bit. I'll pass over to Ben. Over to you.
Thank you very much. So yes, inside the brain, and together we will discover a bit more about how to power an intelligent digital alien in this case. So it's a three-step process. There's voice recognition to start with. The player is literally talking with their voice. We need to convert those sound waves into text. That text then gets fed into the AI intelligence engine of Charisma. The authors put in a whole bunch of content into Charisma, as Guy described. And Charisma uses context, emotion, memory, all of that stuff, putting it all together and choosing the best reply for Steppenwolf. Because that's just text, that needs to then be converted back into speech, and that's the speech synthesis part. So taking the first step of speech recognition, for this particular project, we used an off-the-shelf speech system. There are a number out there. For this one, there's Speechly and Google Speech Recognition. There's two things to kind of note when you're doing something like that. One is that if you have words in your story world that aren't real words, you need to make sure that your speech recognition system actually recognizes that. So for example, Darkseid, who's a character in the Justice League universe, if the player says dark side, it would literally be transcribed as dark space side, because that's just what it knows. It doesn't know about the concept of dark side. So you need to be careful to pick systems that allow you to boost the probability of recognizing particular words. The other thing to note is that you don't want to get into an infinite echo chamber with Steppenwolf. You need to turn off the microphone when Steppenwolf is speaking, or ensure the player is using headphones. Otherwise, he's just going to talk to himself forever and ever. So the other end of the pipeline, which is the speech synthesis part, Steppenwolf doesn't have many lines in the Justice League movies. I think there's only 10 or 20. It's crazy. And we weren't able to get the voice actor in for this particular project. So we had to make do with existing kind of off-the-shelf voices as well and adjust those. Luckily, Replica provides a whole bunch of really good voices. So here's a baseline, what we started with.
You are nothing but a puny insect. I will squish you.
So yeah, it's not very Steppenwolfy. That's just the baseline. The next step, or next iteration on that, is finding something a bit more emotional. So there are variants of voices. They've recorded a whole bunch of lines and munged all that data together into a furious voice in this case, which sounds like this.
You are nothing but a puny insect. I will squish you.
So we're getting a bit closer towards where we want to be with the Steppenwolf voice. And the next step is tuning that with what's called SSML, speech synthesis markup language, and tune the rate and the pitch right down. And this is the result of that.
You are nothing but a puny insect. I will squish you.
So he's starting to sound really, it sounds like Steppenwolf now. And that's what we've gone for this project. So Guy mentioned earlier the charisma graph. Does it look familiar? You might have seen it in Westworld. You might have seen it in Free Guy. We were deeply humbled that the VFX agencies of Hollywood took inspiration from Charisma for their own interpretations of AI intelligent systems. But it turns out the graphs are actually a really powerful way to structure conversation. So Guy mentioned earlier, we have character nodes and player nodes, and really these are the building blocks of a conversation. In the character node, you write anything that character is going to say. You can link that up to then a player node. That's what the player is going to say, and then link that up to the next one. And so this conversation will go something like, who is your most valued friend? The player says Batman. And then Steppenwolf says, the bat would not stoop so low as to team with a worm like you. He's a very angry person. So the way that the player node works is funky, and it's backed by a whole load of machine learning classifiers and a whole bunch of AI. So there's the general intents, and that's 6 pre-trained kind of categories, and that catches a whole bunch of sentences in those categories. So thumbs up would be yes, yeah, great, sounds good, let's go. And equally thumbs down would be the opposite. As Guy mentioned, you often want something more specific. Like if the player says, why are you so interested in destroying Earth? We need to be able to cater for that. And so by using ML, we can transform the text in those sentences into essentially a mathematical representation, and then we can compare them. So they're known as sentence embeddings. There's like 512 numbers in there. By the way, it's Pi Day today, so happy Pi Day. So in this example, if the player says, "You're a crazy alien fool," but the author's written, "You are an extraterrestrial sadist," the machine learning picks it up that they're roughly the same kind of concept, and they match, and it goes down that pathway. This is both a blessing and a curse. It can undercatch and overcatch. So, for example, it doesn't in this case, but if you had a sentence like, "I don't want to go to the supermarket," and you try to compare that against, "I do want to go to the supermarket," those are quite similar syntactically. Luckily, in this case, the semantic content of do and do not is enough to kind of separate those in mathematical space so that they don't match. But it's a fine-tuning process, and yeah, you just need to iterate on it a lot. One of the other big aspects of Steppenwolf is his emotion, and is generally either hate or anger. I've never seen a node with joy yet. So you can see from this graph, this is kind of the effect of authoring a hate feeling. And it gradually kind of decreases his mood over time before starting to stabilize back to his baseline personality. And that's the effects of that can be seen in the facial animation, and in gating content as well. So for example, you might have a bit of content that you want to say only show if Steppenwolf is happy or sad or angry. So you can gate particular bits of content based upon emotion too. A note on memory: the best virtual characters remember stuff, and they quote it back to you, and they use it to inform kind of future experiences. So we use memories for all kinds of things, from whether the player is saying "okay" far too much, which a guy tends to do, or whether the player would give up their life for their parents. So very different kind of memories. And the way you can do that is just by linking up a memory node. Charisma is all about linking up nodes in the right way, and we give the power to kind of the author to use those memories then however they might want to. And lastly, a note on metadata. So metadata is kind of a way to attach key value pairs of stuff to a character node. And this could be anything from playing an animation, a sound cue. It could be like changing the weather of the experience. Guy mentioned that we use it for making him move with his axe, or move around the cave a bit. So it's totally flexible for whatever kind of system you want to influence in the end experience, and yeah, again, gives the author a whole bunch of control over how they might want to author and make the experience play out. So with that said, I will pass back to Guy.
Thank you. And so, picking up from that, we, as I said, seek inspiration in what we're doing from Charisma, from storytellers and from video games industry. Looking at where we get the inspiration from in storytelling, though, is interesting. So we've run now 5 writers' rooms, mainly in the UK. We're expanding it out. The most influential one for us was one I was talking about earlier, where we had 25 writers for over 2 days, and we were teaching them about charisma. And we were teaching them not only in the way that we've just sort of given you an outline, but we were starting to say, if you're writing a story, what needs to happen? So we're talking about a movie, for example. If there's a standard movie rule that if you come into a movie after the first 15 minutes, you're not going to get the rest of the movie, because all of the things have been set up in those first 15 minutes, and you're not going to understand the context. What's that for this? So we started to put in rules and test those. That, for example, in the first 2 minutes, you want to capture the person's name, because you want to use that. You want to hyper-personalize the story straight away. And one of the best ways to do that is capture their name and then expand out that information. So we're starting to put in these sorts of rule sets around storytelling. The writers, just as anecdotally, by the way, out of those 25 writers, we had people from poetry, from AAA games, through movies, TV, and theatre. And it was the theatre guys who got it. And in fact, our writing lead, Rihanna, now is from theatre and immersive theatre background. And my theory is very simple, which is they have proximity to audience, you know? And if you've been to a theatre and at the end of the show, they'll say, "Oh, thank you very much, you've been a great audience." That means something. It means that they've felt your energy. Whether you've been quiet or whether you've stood up and interacted doesn't matter. If you've been a good audience, it affects them. So they're able to work that concept of the importance of an audience into their storytelling, whereas someone maybe who is writing a book or a movie or a TV doesn't have that because they don't have that connection. So as we start to then look at the journey that we're on, the first piece in our journey was about, we launched in fact, exactly 2 years ago. We were going to launch it here in South by March 2020. Remember that month? And that was about interactive graphic novels. There were 2D adaptations. We licensed a bunch of graphic novels and adapted them. So it's and the graphic novel is a great format because it's visual and it's dialogue based. What you saw earlier, visual, dialogue based. Let's do the adaptation. That was 2D. Then we connected Charisma out into 3D. So we connected it to Unity, we connected it to Unreal. That's great. They tend to be sort of locked off, projects. So again, like a game, you compile it and you put it out there and that's that. Metaverse is a different game altogether, simply because they're persistent. They are always on. And that creates 7 shades of difficulty in terms of how you need to think about storylines. Let me give you an example. Let's say, for example, I do a game which is around man walks into a bar. This is a real test I gave the team during lockdown. Let's build something in Unity where we've got a Western-style saloon. Looks a little bit like Westworld. And you walk into the saloon and there are, say, 15 people. Whatever you do, whether you turn left and talk to the table on the left, you turn right and talk to the table on the right, you go up to the bar, whatever action you take is going to influence all of the other characters in that bar. Because they're going to get grumpy that you're not talking to them, or they are, and then all of that stuff. That's complicated. In a metaverse environment, imagine now I walk into the bar and then a minute later Ben walks into this virtual bar in a multiplayer environment. Is Ben seeing the same story at the same point that I am? Or is Ben having the story from Act 1, Scene 1? Short answer, don't know. These are really, really sort of the tough questions for storytelling. And if you want to see a real sort of Hollywood example of how this works, in Ready Player One, got to name check it at some point in the presentation, the bit that really leapt out for me was the Shining scene, where they go back into that. Because what you have in a brilliant way was, great book, The Shining, turned into a movie, which was then written about in a book called Ready Player One, which was then turned into a movie, which was actually set in a metaverse. Like, okay, I'm now totally lost, I don't know where I am. But imagine those guys have gone into that metaverse and they're having that experience, and what do they see is a core constraint. So as we look into this, we're looking at these sorts of character relationships. You're extending the character relationships beyond a printed book, beyond a 100-minute movie, beyond an 8-hour TV series. These character relationships, because they're persistent, can last weeks, maybe years. How does that work? Half answer, I'll point you to, and we reference it on our site. We did a piece of research with the University of Southern California and the Entertainment Technology Center there, writing a paper called Universal Character Model. And it's an idea of saying, in this new world, how do you write the character? What do you need to think about for it? And the answer, the super simple solution model we start to look at was, it's a bit like a skateboarding half pipe, where the narrative is going down the bottom, and is held down there according to gravity. But the player can have conversations outside of that and veer off on tangents, and you should still be able to have those conversations, have those dialogues, but we want to be brought back into the narrative. So for us, that was a key paper that's published there. Also, so that's there. Fluidity of story events. So as we have evolved Charisma, we started with as I said, adapting graphic novels. The story events in those books were set, And we expanded them a little bit, but not too much. We then evolved a version of Charisma which was more fluid, where you didn't have to rely so much on sort of scenes and acts, but we just loosened it up a little bit. And then the third piece, which is where we are now, is that what is driving the stories in Charisma are events, rather than being acts or scenes or chapters. It's what happens in the stories that then trigger what happens next. Now you can think about it back to Shakespeare, you know, same deal. Something happens, someone takes poison or stabs someone, whatever, that's an event that drives the story. But when you sort of uncouple it into what the player's doing, where you need a lot of flexibility because you need that immersion, it becomes more interesting. AI enables this. We just couldn't do this before, because before you had to set these rigid structures and there was no way to manage that sort of fuzzy fluidity where the player can go off and do something random. And I'll show you as a sort of takeaway the piece I was just talking to at the beginning about an experiment we're doing where we're allowing AI to run free in this space, and what it generates. It's a bit crazy. Because what we've discovered is that within Charisma, we've always put the author, the writer, number one. It's their story, it's their piece, their characters, and so we want them to write it. But as these stories get more fluid generally, and levels of immersion increase, you've got to be able to support them. And that's what AI is doing. It's looking at those edge cases where the writer said, this is a type of character as Ben described, Steppenwolf, you know, who's predominantly grumpy, you know, is not full of joy, all of that good stuff. That's the rule set of that character. Now, AI, run down and start to create dialogue around that that's consistent with it. And right from day one, we had the sort of the Harry Potter test for a number of different reasons. One is that if we were to let AI run off with Harry Potter as a piece of dialogue, it has to be on canon. It has to be consistent with the Harry Potter universe. You cannot have a conversation about South by Southwest with Harry Potter. Too many people would, you know, it breaks that piece. So how do you put those guardrails around? And we're spending a lot of time in that space right now. And that's in our space of automatic content generators, technically known as GPT, as an automatic language generator. GPT-3 is the most famous one. We've been working in GPT-2 and GPT-3 now for 2.5 years or something. And GPT-J is the new sort of iteration of that, which is ethically more transparent, which we like it. But above all, we find ourselves in this really interesting space that while we're talking about AI, while we're at South by Southwest, while we're, you know, it's a cutting edge of metaverses and NFTs and all this stuff, actually I find myself stepping backwards in time. And I step back before film, before books, before even, you know, the monks were writing down stories with quill pens, back to when there were traveling minstrels telling stories. And what they would do is they'd roam from town to town, and they'd stay the night in the inn, and they'd listen to all the gossip. They'd get the mayor's name. They'd get they'd hear who was being unfaithful with whom in the village, and all of those things. And then the next day, when they were telling their stories, they would weave all of those in. That is fluidity in the stories. And there's a sort of slightly unpopular argument I sometimes put out was the book killed that. It caged stories in paper, because suddenly, when it was printed, that was it. There was no way in which those sort of topical news events could filter in that fluidity. Finally, we're able to bring that cycle back. So it's sort of ironic in this space. So top 5 takeaways. Consider, as I said already, flexible reuse of virtual production assets. If you're building them, think about where they might travel. You know, where might your stories travel? And push for that. Anticipate real time. Charisma is real time. That's one of our key pieces. It's not like, as you saw with Steppenwolf, it's not like that was it was rendered into a video, but the experience is generated in real time. So anticipate what that might look like. Anticipate that longevity of a storyline that may last for a year, and think about these things. The biggest challenge we have, funnily enough, is not so much technical. Ben might disagree in some areas. But it's creative, because we want the writers to think outside of their standard ways of storytelling, and that's challenging. Pipelines. the piece I showed you about the Mandalorian, but going back to that, that's crazy innovation around pipelines, and it's enabled by AI, by companies like Jali, who we work with, I mentioned, where there is an element of automation. That automation is not in any way taking any jobs away. It's making you do your job better and enabling you to make more, your stories, your work, your art, reach more people, faster and better quality. And embrace the interactivity. This bit's really scary for a lot of people, that interactive piece, being close to the audience, listening to your audience, being a bit worried about what they think of your work. But if you embrace it, audiences love it because suddenly they're inside the story. So finally, I will show you a little video which starts like this. So this is, I'm not sure I should introduce a new project as the final slide, but I'm going to do it anyway. This is a project called projectelectricsheep.com. It is our art technology test around GPT. And this is a 3D dream simulator. As a user, you as a player, you type in your dream. Your dream may be South by Southwest. In fact, this dream I'm about to show you, the dream was South by Southwest. And that keyword. Everything you see on screen has never existed before. All of this is generated by AI. Those faces have never existed before. They were generated in real time by AI. The name, friendly neighbor, never existed before. That's generated in real time. The dialogue you're about to see, the building that you'll see, that weather system, the sky, all of that was generated off that single keyword in real time by AI. So this is the bit that I was saying, what happens when you let AI run off the rails? So here we have South by Southwest. It's a great sharing of ideas. For a lot of people also, it's a selling opportunity. So this is what happens when we start to run it.
I'm afraid I don't buy what you're selling. As a matter of fact, I think you might be selling something that doesn't exist.
What exactly is it that you think I'm selling?
I think you might be selling a dream, or an idea that's not grounded in reality.
Yeah, you are correct. I am selling a dream, and you're in it.
What do you mean?
This is an AI-based dream simulator in which you are a character.
What's the point?
Entertainment, I guess. Also, I have a bit of a god complex.
So what? You're just going to keep me in this dream forever?
No, the moment I leave this dream, you'll probably cease to exist.
That's not very nice.
I suppose not. Sorry, I guess.
Well, that's not very reassuring. Thanks for nothing.
And so we're in the conversation there. So that's that. And again, you can see how what starts as a conversation about buying and selling suddenly takes a really weird trip down, some strange metaverse layer. And so we'll be releasing something along these lines later this year. What is interesting about this is that it's taking that AI pipeline and generating something sort of completely out there. Someone said to me last week, it's got overtones of Studio Ghibli. I was like, wow, thank you. That's more than that. But it's meant to be slightly trippy. So look, that's where we are as Charisma. That's where we're heading. Thought I'd end on a little bit of future piece there. I'm Guy. That's Ben. And if you've got any questions, please ask away. Thank you. I forgot Thank you. Good question there.
I had a question about sort of story consistency. If you think of it, so this is a little bit technical, but if you think of it as you have to make the model good enough that when you reach from when it generates, it's correct, or whether you're grabbing a bunch of times and you have sort of like a rejector that says that's inconsistent with our world, so we have to sort of punish it for being inconsistent. It has to do kind of with how much you're allowed to explore. If you go farther up the walls of your canyon, you'll get weird stuff, and you'll probably not consistent.
It's a really good question. I'm going to pass you that so you can take it as well. So there are two sides to that coin. One is the first, where we are with Charisma, which is giving the author control over the system. So in other words, that consistency will always be there because they control it as the author. As you start to head into the generative piece, that's what we've been doing a lot of research into. And there are techniques of what we call the art of the prompt. So prompting GPT-3 down a particular direction. The art of the prompt, which is remarkably similar to the job of an editor in old world, is to make sure that that prompt is crafted in such a way that it does that consistency remains. It is not an absolute. At the moment, we find it veering off into inconsistencies, and that's called fine tuning.
So your world consistency is by having a prompt that's likely to condition GPT the right way.
Yeah. So what you do is you want in that prompt, you need to make sure that you're describing the world on a regular basis. So Harry Potter again. It is a school. It is a school for magic. Step one. Step two. You're starting to narrow it down. You are in a room. It is Dumbledore's office. There is a fire burning. Step three. And then you're going down to. So you're refining the context within which that prompt is created to reduce the possibility of going off context. Within our world, and Ben is very adamant on this, there is, AI is not at the point where we can generate stories of any quality yet, and you've got too much inconsistency. So it is a risk. The reward, however, is the ability to have that fluidity and sort of real-time dynamism. So we're getting there, and we're spending, it's an inconsistent answer because it's a new challenge. It's a new challenge, and it's a very creative way of looking at AI, and we're looking at this from a creativity standpoint of the technology, if that makes sense. Is there anything you wanted to add on that?
Yeah, I was just going to say, with GPT, there is no guarantee of consistency. You cannot guarantee it fundamentally. That's just the way it works. It's a probabilistic model. It picks up numbers and puts them in an order, and you will never ever guarantee story consistency with GPT. However, there are steps that you can take to start to condition it, and then we're thinking a lot about the mechanisms and the frameworks for how to bring it back into the story if it does go off into its own tangent. That's the interesting bit, is about bringing it back, I think.
Yes, sir.
Have you guys ever encountered a scenario where, in the short term, for a smaller audience, a production company or a creator is using live actors, as is the case in some of these other presentations or experiences, fundamentally has limitations in scale, right, and cost and accessibility, using that as sort of like a premium short burst experience, and then using the AI component as the longer term living, breathing, maybe even just the gaps between these sort of like tentpole moments where there's so much that goes into doing live production with a live actor, you just can't do it forever or for even very long. So I'm just wondering if you've seen that, or if you worked on something like that that is a hybrid approach.
We've certainly seen it, and it's increasing. And what we're seeing at the moment is that you get the sort of A-list performance, which is human, that B-list piece, which may be, Tom Cruise running off across a square in sort of mid distance. That's not that can be AI. So the way you termed it as filling the gaps is really good. It is at the moment filling the gaps, and indeed we were talking with the Royal Shakespeare Company. We were doing a session earlier this morning. They've got actors who are both acting and I call it puppeteering the metahumans on the screen. So she's giving a performance here, and he, as the metahuman, is giving the performance up on the screen. As you say, it's not scalable, and I love the idea that you can extend it through that. That's very much of our piece. So I think what you're starting to see is that trend emerging, but it's not yet coming through in the way that I think it will in the next few months. Yeah, I think we'll see. Yeah, this is moving really fast. Really fast. And if you look at, I mean, there are various. It's really interesting. When I finally write the book that I want, about the history of all this stuff.
Are you gonna write it, or is it AI?
I did not do it today, but I have had AI write presentations for me. They're much better than I would. I think that Mandalorian was a key shift actually, and the other one more recently of that was Warner Brothers and Epic doing the Matrix piece, because what it did was where the Mandalorian was doing virtual production, but it was locked. That Matrix piece where if you didn't see it, they sort of recreated the set and then did Carrie-Anne Moss and Keanu Reeves. That's great. And then 55,000 metahuman pedestrians. Just that, and they will release that world out for people to play with in the coming thing. So I think what that does, it unshackles, it unchains that world which was chained in Mandalorian, and now says go play, and that's going to be interesting. So I think it will be in the next couple of months. Yeah. Jed.
Well, just a question. This sort of like what happened, or the AFK question. If you're having a generative world with story, right, and I leave for a day, right? If I'm playing a game, if I have Sims, or if I'm playing in Minecraft, right, and I come back and all my stuff is destroyed, right? I have an idea of what happened. If I come back to my story and the world has changed a lot, do you know how you get me back into at least catch me up? Like what happened here? Oh, is there a
So keen to know your thoughts on this. I'll give you an example of a massively multiplayer game I did in the late 90s, years and years ago, which was persistent. It was a persistent world. And every now and again, we would get that email from one of the players, which was, I've been playing for 6 hours and I've just built up all this stuff and then I fell asleep on my keyboard. And when I woke up, someone had come in and killed my ship and I've lost everything. Please reinstate it. We're like, no, we can't, because that is us playing God in a way which we cannot do within that gameplay.
Oh, I don't want to go backwards. I just want the characters to tell me
to know where you are.
What happened.
So I think, and possibly we could, because we're aware of where that state is. Actually, it's a good question. It's where we're aware of where you've been, and memories are supremely powerful. We touched on it a little bit, but actually, the concept of memories in storytelling could well be the character saying, "Hey, man, you've missed some things since you've been away." In fact, it'll know exactly the time. So you've been away it could be something as mathematical and non-creative as you've been away from the game. I've missed you over the last 16 and a half hours. While you've been away, this has happened, because it'll know it.
Yeah, I think it links also back to like that time stream kind of debate about how do you implement time in a shared environment. I mean, if it's single player, then you have like divine save points and that. But I think it's very much just up to the game designer to design the experience in a way that they feel works best. I don't think there's a general purpose solution to that. Each experience is different. So,
and it does play to charisma being a maker platform. We do want to, I mean it really seriously. We want to empower the creatives to create the stories they want to make. And if we do that, we need to sit back and be more agnostic and be more flexible and say, we're not going to dictate how you write it. We'll give you hints and we'll create showcases. But, it's otherwise we're creating Microsoft Clippy, saying, hey, it looks like you want to write a letter. It's like, no, that's not what we want to do. We want to empower them to write the stories they want to write. And like I said, and I think one of the most interesting things that I love is the thing I enjoy most is seeing the shape of different writers' stories. And it's a weird thing to say, but because charisma is such a visual node-based piece, some people will write left to right, as I showed. And yet that hub and spoke thing is so fascinating. You know, it's almost like you're looking into their brain and seeing how you are looking into their brain, seeing how they think and how they craft stories. That's where we are. Any other questions? Thank you so much for being here. It's been a real pleasure, and I hope you enjoyed this. Please get in touch. We're always around, and if you like what you see, get in touch as always. And go and get some cool water. That Diet Coke that's coming. No, God, no. It's just been in my mind now. Enjoy. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thank you. Cheers.